Good afternoon. Today I'm going to be reviewing the Traska Ventura GMT Carbon Black. This watch is available from traskawatch.com for €689. The watch is available in 4 colour options: Carbon Black, Arctic White, Steel Blue and Meteorite. Of the 4 colour options, I think this Carbon Black version is the best looking. So firstly, let's look at the box that the watch comes in, and then I'll talk you through the specifications of the piece. So the watch comes in a black leather travel case, which is housed inside a cardboard watch box, and the cardboard watch box is protected by this black cardboard outer sleeve. So one removes the sleeve, and also you can see the lid to the watch box is branded with the Traska emblem and Traska logo. One removes the lid, pulls down the flap, and I'll remove the travel case and show it to you. So, as you can see, the flap is embossed with the Traska emblem to a good standard, flawless stitching around the perimeter, no loose stitches, nice matte sheen to the grain finish of the leather, and there's a stainless steel popper which secures the flap. The interior has a grey contrasting suede effect to it, and inside we have a foam panel with slots cut in it, and this padded foam panel is also upholstered with suede effect fabric. Very well thought through design. Traska deserve credit because this panel goes in between the bracelet clasp and also the case back, and it prevents the clasp rubbing against the case back, scuffing and scratching it when it's inside the travel case. So it works very well, very aesthetically pleasing. Now, Traska deserve full credit here because they could have taken the less expensive default option of just using a cardboard or plastic watch box, but this leather travel case is more expensive but more aesthetically pleasing. So it's an example to other mid-tier micro brands at this price point of how to get presentation correct. Now, with the watch you also get an owner's instruction manual. This one is for the commuter specifically, but the Ventura GMT has a similar owner's instruction manual, so I'll show it to you. There's a clear concise diagram and also clear concise instructions in English which detail the operation of the movement used, which is the Miyota caliber 9075 automatic, and on the reverse we have the terms and conditions of the 3-year international warranty. Now, I want to give due credit to Traska here because often mid-tier micro brands at this price point only provide a 12-month or 2-year international warranty. To get 3 years of international warranty really is exceptional, and Traska deserve full credit for this. So, with regards to the specifications of the piece, we have a 38.5mm case diameter, we have a lug-to-lug measurement of 46mm, a thickness of 12.4mm, and a lug width of 20mm. The oyster style bracelet tapers from 20mm at the lugs down to 16mm at the 2-button push clasp. The 2-button push clasp is a micro adjustment clasp, and it's signed to a good standard with high definition engraving of the Traska emblem. Brushed satin finishing has a nice fine grained finish to the body, and that contrasts with the flawless mirror polishing to the flanks. The 2 flat head screws for the micro adjustment mechanism are recessed slightly and they're mirror polished to a good standard. 2-button push triggers are brushed satin finished to a good standard, and there's a nice large mirror polished bevel which marks the transition between the brushed satin finished body and the contrasting mirror polished flanks. Proportions are good and it is well finished throughout. We have a boxed top hat style double dome sapphire crystal with clear AR coating on the underside, and the clear anti-reflective coating does an outstanding job of reducing the glare and the highly reflective nature of the silver mirror polished applied indices and the silver mirror polished baton handset. The GMT hour hand has a contrasting red triangle which is correctly proportioned, and it extends all the way to the inner rotating bezel with 24-hour scale. So, symmetry of the dial is good. They've made the correct decision by citing the date complication, which is framed in silver and complements the silver applied indices at 6 o'clock. They could have cited the date complication at 3, but that would have spoiled the symmetry of the dial and made it asymmetrical. I like the double applied indices at 12 o'clock, good orientation to the dial. With regards to the printing of the chaptering, the minute ticks are nice and crisp and high definition, they're not too thick. The 24-hour Arabic numerals on the inner rotating bezel are also correctly proportioned and nice and high definition. Traska emblem, Traska logo at 12 is sharp and crisp, and we just have the right amount of information. Often mid-tier micro brands have a tendency to overbrand the dial with unnecessary specification. For example, the water resistance rating, but this is a GMT piece and therefore we do not need to know the water resistance rating of it. It simply has GMT in red and automatic, so just the right amount of information. I like the GMT red text because it complements the GMT red triangle, and the legibility is good, the proportions of the indices are correct, the length of the hands is also correct. So I like the baton hands, and I also like the contrasting red triangle on the GMT hour hand. Now we have 2 crowns. The 3 o'clock crown is for setting the date, the quick set hour hand, and also setting the time. The crown at 10 o'clock operates the inner rotating 24-hour bezel for the GMT complication. Early versions of the Venturer didn't have a screw down crown at 10 o'clock. The 3 o'clock crown was a screw down crown, but the 10 o'clock crown for the GMT inner rotating bezel wasn't. Now, I'm pleased to see that Traska have updated this because there was a problem with it. Originally, on the early versions of the Venturer, you could rub against the 10 o'clock crown, and that could potentially accidentally knock the inner rotating bezel out of position because it could rotate freely. Now, it was friction based rather than being screwed down, but they've updated this Venturer, and this 10 o'clock crown is now a screw down crown, the same as the screw down crown for the 3 o'clock crown, so it's good. You can't accidentally rub against it and knock the inner rotating bezel out of position. It's always good to see a micro brand in the mid-tier update and refine their pieces to constantly endeavour to improve them. So let's test the 3 o'clock crown first of all. Solid 316L grade stainless steel, coin edge finish to it, nice large chamfer to it, and it's engraved, as you can see, with the Traska emblem to a good standard, matte B blasted background, and the emblem itself is mirror polished. Nice high definition engraving, as you can see, very good quality. So let's test unscrewing it. Absolutely silky smooth. This is sublime screw down crown execution. Quality control, build quality and tolerances are exceptional. To put this into perspective, it is as silky smooth as the screw down crown on my Rolex Submariner Date 16610, which uses a triplock crown, and that is really the industry standard for smoothness. There's no discernible difference in the quality of the smoothness of this screw down crown and a Rolex Tudor or Omega piece, so it's really high tier level at a mid tier price point of €689. Minimal number of turns required to unscrew it. Nice and smooth, good interface between the internal thread of the stainless steel crown and the external thread of the stainless steel crown tube. It provides an effective hermetic seal to 150 meters, which is strong specification. This is a GMT piece, not a dive piece. 50 meters or 100 meters would have sufficed. 150 is strong specification for a daily wear piece. So when it's unscrewed, we're now in the manual wind position, and one can manually wind the Miyota caliber 9075 automatic to its maximum 42-hour power reserve. Medium resistance to it, one can feel the tension in the mainspring gradually building up to its maximum 42 hours. Feels nice and smooth to manually wind. To put this into perspective, it feels smoother to manually wind than a Seiko NH34A GMT movement. And I like it. It feels smoother than a Sellita SW200-1, for example. It's got that characteristic smooth winding. You can feel the gears meshing, but they feel refined and good quality because you can feel that there's minimal friction and the meshing is very good. So it feels very smooth to manually wind. I really like the feeling of it. Pulling it out to the first click position is the quick set hour hand. Now, as you can see, rotating the crown anti-clockwise cycles the hour hand independently of the other hands clockwise, and also advances the date complication. When you cycle through the 24 hours, you can see the date complication at 6 will click over with a nice positive click. You can also rotate the crown clockwise, and that will move the hour hand anti-clockwise. So you can rotate the date complication forward or in reverse, which is good. So you don't have to cycle through the full 30 days of the month. It acts like a quick set date. And also it means you can set the hour hand independently of the GMT hour hand. So that's good if you're traveling between time zones. You can simply adjust the 12-hour hand. You don't need to adjust the other hands. You can adjust it independently. So this is a traveller GMT rather than an office GMT. And in simple terms, what that means is it's a true traveller GMT movement. Now, it feels very similar, has a clicking mechanism to the NH34A GMT. That's how it feels. It's got that clicking feeling, which feels very similar to the GMT hour hand on the NH34A. That's the kind of sensation. Each of the GMT hours are clearly indexed, so you can feel it clicking around both clockwise and anti-clockwise. So it's not just smooth and friction based, it does actually have a clicking sensation to it. And I like the way the quick set complication clicks over with a nice positive click. So pulling it out to the second click position hacks the movement. If you look at the second hand, you can see it's now stopped dead, so it's possible to set the time precisely to the second with a caliber 9075. And you can now set the time for the 12-hour hands in the conventional method. You can also rotate the GMT hour hand through the 24 hours by cycling it clockwise and anti-clockwise. So there are two ways you can set it. You can either set the inner rotating bezel using the 24-hour scale for a second time zone, or alternatively, you can cycle through the 12 hours to rotate the GMT hour hand this way. Feels smooth, both clockwise and anti-clockwise, cycling through the 24 hours. Minimal backplay in it, feels like a nice tight, robust movement. One can feel the meshing of the gearing. Now, one thing I like about the caliber 9075 is the lack of backplay. When you rotate the crown in the time setting position, clockwise and anti-clockwise, there's an almost immediate response to the baton minute hand. Minimal backplay, much less than on a Sellita SW200-1, for example, where you have to take up a lot of slack. And I really like that refinement. And this is a premium 9000 grade Miyota caliber. The 9075 does have that extra refinement. It feels better, tighter than an 8000 series. So it feels very good. Pushing it back in, it's got a nice positive click, and that restarts the movement. You can see the second hand begins to sweep around the dial once again at the characteristic 4 Hz sweep. Again, that's something I really like about Miyota 9000 series calibers, such as this 9075. They run at 4 Hz and 28,800 vibrations per hour versus the 3 Hz, which has a stutter or judder to the second hand as per 8000 series movements, such as the 8215, for example. So let's test screwing the crown back down. Instant thread pickup. This is sublime screw down crown execution. Perfect interface between the internal thread of the stainless steel crown and the external thread of the stainless steel crown tube. Quality control, build quality and tolerances are exceptional. This is high tier level crown execution. It feels very similar to a high tier screw down crown on a €5,000 price point piece. This is a mid tier piece costing €689, but you're getting €5,000 screw down crown execution. Outstanding, one of the best silky smooth screw down crowns I've experienced at this price point. Now let's test the screw down crown for the inner rotating bezel. So as you can see, it's got a signed globe engraved logo. As you can see, matte bead blasted effect to the background, and it's got mirror polishing to the grid formation to the globe engraving, and it's very aesthetically pleasing. So as I've detailed, early versions of the Ventura simply had a friction based crown at 10 o'clock for setting the inner rotating bezel. It wasn't a screw down crown, but they've updated it. Absolutely silky smooth, no discernible difference between the 10 o'clock and the 3 o'clock crowns. They feel exactly the same. Perfect interface between the internal stainless steel internal stainless steel thread of the crown and the external stainless steel thread of the crown tube. So when it's unscrewed, which takes a minimal number of turns, you can rotate the bidirectional inner rotating bezel for the GMT complication. Now, it feels very light. Doesn't have a lot of friction, and it doesn't click. It feels smooth, both clockwise and anti-clockwise. The thing I like about it is there is no backplay whatsoever. You don't need to take up slack in the gearing. It feels nice and tight. So the gearing meshes very well with the inner rotating bezel. When you rotate the 10 o'clock crown, there's an immediate response with the inner rotating bezel. You don't have to take up slack. Clockwise and anti-clockwise, there is no play whatsoever. When you rotate the crown just a fraction, the inner rotating bezel moves a fraction, so it's very precise. It feels refined. So cycles through the 24 hours very smoothly. Feels nice and light. Doesn't have a lot of friction. So as I've detailed, this was the problem with the original Ventura, because the inner rotating bezel had that light feeling to it, both clockwise and anti-clockwise. And prior to it having a screw down crown, you could accidentally rub against the crown at 10 o'clock and knock the bezel out of position potentially. So it was a risk, and that was a problem with it, because sometimes it does happen. You accidentally rub against the crown with your wrist, for example, and that would rotate the GMT inner rotating bezel out of position. But they've now negated this problem because they've got the screw down crown. So you can set it in position, and then you simply push it in and screw it back down. And it's very good because there's an immediate thread pickup. The internal thread of the stainless steel crown perfectly meshes with the external thread of the stainless steel crown tube. Absolutely silky smooth. It is sublime. €5,000 price point screw down crown execution on a mid-tier piece costing €689. This is something Traska do very well. The screw down crowns are consistently 10 out of 10. So it works very well. Both the 3 o'clock crown for setting the time and also the date complication works well, and the 10 o'clock crown for setting the GMT inner rotating bezel works well. They could not improve upon it. Quality of the finishing, proportions are correct, the coin edge finishing is good, nice large chamfer to it which deletes the tips of the teeth, so grippy and tactile, correctly proportioned, easy to get purchased with your index finger and thumb on both the 3 o'clock crown and the 10 o'clock crown. Proportions are good, they don't project too far from the left hand flank like a helium escape valve on an Amiga Seamaster for example, which is too large. It's nice and low profile so it doesn't dig into the wrist or the back of the hand. Both crowns are correctly proportioned. It's an example to other mid-tier brands of how to get it correct. So let's look at the bracelet and end links in detail. Female pivoted end links are the correct choice. What we're looking at with this piece is correct decision after correct decision. They could have used male end links, but the benefit of female pivot end links is it enhances the fit and comfort level. This is 46mm lug to lug, so it is compact. So this is particularly suitable for collectors with a smaller wrist of 6 to 7 inches. So because it doesn't have male end links, you can see the end link in the oyster style bracelet articulates well. Very smooth. We've got the refinement there. In terms of smoothness, it feels very similar to the female pivoted end links used on the Tudor Black Bay 58. That is the quality we're looking at. So, doesn't have excessive lateral, longitudinal, side to side or up and down play. Good interference fit between the pin going through the female pivoted end link. Doesn't feel stiff or kink, so one doesn't need to manually manipulate it into position. It flows freely. Screw pins in the oyster style bracelet are the correct choice, and I'm pleased to see they didn't use the cost cutting measure of using push pins. Feels nice and tight, doesn't rattle, doesn't have excessive play, longitudinal, lateral, side to side or up and down play, but articulates freely. Doesn't have stiff links, doesn't kink, but it feels nice and refined. Now with regards to the finishing, it is absolutely fantastic. This is €5,000 high tier level finishing. The brushed satin finishing has a nice fine grained finish. To put this into perspective, this is every bit as good as the finishing on a Rolex Submariner, alternatively Amiga Seamaster or Tudor Black Bay. That is the level of finishing. The fine grained finishing to the satin finishing is very aesthetically pleasing, and it contrasts with the flawless mirror polishing to the flanks. No sharp edges to the top edge or the lower edge of the flanks, and articulates freely, doesn't rattle, and doesn't pull arm hairs. So let's check the other side for continuity. Again, the female pivoted end link articulates freely, doesn't feel stiff or kink, doesn't have excessive play in any direction, doesn't rattle, doesn't have a sharp edge to the top edge or the low edge of the flanks. Brushed satin finishing has a beautiful luster to it, and that complements the contrasting mirror polishing to the flanks. Nice large 1.6mm screw pins. Now often micro brands only use 1.2mm screws. This uses 1.6mm, which is the same size as on Rolex pieces. That means that you can get good purchase with a jeweler's screwdriver. It's the correct size, and the screw pins are finished to a very good standard with mirror polishing to the screw pin heads. It's a fantastic bracelet. Now one detail I really like about this piece is it is entirely made from hardened 316L grade stainless steel, and the hardened steel has a hardness rating of 1200 HV. HV stands for hardness Vickers. So to put that into perspective, standard grade 316L grade stainless steel typically has a hardness rating of 200 HV, 200 hardness Vickers. This has a hardness rating of 1200 HV. So 1200 HV versus the standard 200 HV. The benefit of that is that this piece isn't going to be prone to being scuffed and scratches in the usual places with daily wear and tear. For example, on the micro adjustment clasp, often it's a problem with 316L grade stainless steel clasp. They have a tendency to pick up scuffs and scratches on the clasp and also on the bracelet. But this is made entirely from hardened stainless steel. The bezel, the head of the piece, the case back, the bracelet and the clasp are all made from 1200 HV hardened stainless steel. Every part of this watch. This is very unusual to see at this price point. Other brands such as Hanhardt, for example, do it with the Pioneer HD12, but that is a more expensive price point piece. That is over €1,000. We're not looking at a high tier piece costing in excess of €5,000 here. This is a mid tier piece costing €689, but we have hardened 1200 HV 316L grade stainless steel throughout. So it's very good. It also has a beautiful luster to it. It looks very similar to the 904L grade oyster steel that Rolex are using. It has that characteristic fine-grained satin finish to it, and the hardness rating is very good. 1200 is very scratch resistant. With regards to the finishing, the bezel has that nice sunburst pattern to it which refracts the light rather than being concentric CNC lathe tool machined or mirror polished, and I love the radial sunburst finishing to it because it catches the light and refracts it beautifully. Nice mirror polished chamfer to the edge of the bezel, and that deletes the sharp edge to the top of the sunburst bezel, and the edge of it is also brushed satin finish, so nice contrast with the finishing to the low profile bezel. I like the way the box top hat crystal projects above the bezel. It gives the piece a vintage aesthetic. It looks rather like a plexiglass or acrylic domed crystal used in the 1960s or 1970s, but of course sapphire crystal is harder and more scratch resistant. The case is finished to perfection. Beautiful brushed satin finishing to the tops of the lugs, which contrasts with the flawless mirror polishing to the flanks. Nice curved undercut to the flanks, no sharp edge to the undercut, and it's also got a nice large mirror polished chamfer to the edge of the case, which marks the transition between the tops of the lugs and the flanks. Pierce lugs, which are also good because they make it easy to remove the spring bar externally. You can simply press the spring bar tool externally through the pierce lugs to exchange the bracelet for a strap. And also it gives the piece a vintage aesthetic which complements the box top hat profile to the crystal. So finishing to the bezel, the head of the piece and also the bracelet is perfection personified. They've also made the correct decision with the taper. 20-16 is the industry standard for good reason. It is the perfect taper for a 38.5mm head of the piece. So let's look at the 2-button push micro adjustment clasp in detail. Nice foam resistance to the brushed satin finish 2-button push triggers. Opens freely. Now this is something I really like about Traska watches. I've referred to this in my previous reviews. The pelage finishing. One doesn't see pelage finishing at this mid-tier price point of €689. This is the kind of pelage finishing one would expect to see on a high-tier piece costing in excess of €10,000. One doesn't see pelage finishing on bracelet clasp. Solid mill 316L grade stainless steel clasp as one would expect. No sharp corners to the centre section, which is good. Let's check the hinge pins. Left hand hinge pin feels nice and tight. Articulates smoothly, doesn't feel stiff or kink, doesn't have excessive longitudinal, lateral, side to side or up and down play. Good tight tolerances. Let's check the centre hinge pin. Articulates freely, doesn't have excessive play in any direction. Finally, let's check the right hand hinge pin. Articulates freely, doesn't feel stiff or kink, doesn't have excessive longitudinal, lateral, side to side or up and down play. This is an example to other mid-tier microbrands at the €689 price point of how to get build quality, quality control and tolerances correct. This is 10 out of 10. All 3 hinge pins are nice and tight. Pelage finishing is exceptional, very aesthetically pleasing. They've even gone a step further. They could have just brushed satin finished the underside, but even on the underside, on the right hand portion, they have pelage finished it. Strictly speaking, they don't need to do this because it increases production costs and therefore reduces their profit margin per piece. But they could have just brushed satin finished it, but to make it better looking, they've pelage finished it. Incredible. They really deserve credit for it. Now, that's not the only positive because one of my favourite aspects of this piece is the micro adjustment clasp. So it has a spring-loaded ratcheting mechanism. You can depress the push button, which is engraved with push, with your index finger or thumb. This gives one full link of adjustment, on the fly adjustment, as you can see. Now I've fully deployed it. It pushes in with nice, positive, heavy clicks. Loud, audible clicks. Very satisfying. Now you've got to give the trigger a good firm push with your index finger or thumb in order to deploy it. So the benefit is it's not going to accidentally deploy when on wrist when you press against it with wrist pressure, but you can push it in simply with your thumb or index finger. Nice, heavy indexing. I like the loud audible clicks. It feels nice and solid, very heavily sprung loaded. You've got to really push it in so it's not going to accidentally deploy and you're not going to accidentally push it in. The other benefit of this bracelet is they've thought this through very well. It has one full link of micro adjustment, but that's not the only benefit because they've also added a half link either side of the micro adjustment clasp. You can see on the 6 o'clock side we have a half link, and on the 12 o'clock side we have a half link in the oyster style bracelet. Often mid-tier micro brands neglect to do this, because sometimes it's hard to get the perfect fit. When you add or subtract one full link from an oyster style bracelet, it doesn't give the correct fit. It's slightly too tight or too loose. Strictly speaking, Traska didn't need to do this because we've got one full link of micro adjustment with a micro adjustment clasp, but to give the perfect fit for collectors and to make it easy to centralise the clasp on wrist, they've even added a half link either side of the clasp. So you can size the bracelet correctly because you've got half links either side, but you've also got one full link of micro adjustment. So this micro adjustment clasp is one of the better ones I've experienced because you can see doesn't have excess lateral, longitudinal, side to side or up and down play. The tolerances are nice and tight. The build's quality control and tolerances are very good. Nice heavy clicks. Feels good and robust. I like the way the trigger has a very heavy spring-loaded action, so you've really got to push it in firmly with your index finger and thumb. It doesn't feel light. You've got to press it in hard and then it deploys smoothly and it pushes in with nice positive clicks. Really nice loud audible sound. It feels reliable, it feels robust, and the tolerances are good. This is good quality. Also, I like the proportions. Often with micro adjustment clasps, they tend to be very bulky. They're very thick, so they sit proud on the wrist, they stick out, and also they're very wide and bulky and long. This is particularly suitable if you have a smaller wrist of 6 to 7 inches because it's not too long, and also it's not too proud on the wrist, it's not too thick, it's not a bulky micro adjustment clasp. In terms of proportions, it's similar to a Rolex glide lock clasp which has excellent proportions. So let's look at the case back. Solid 316L grade stainless steel case back, sterile centre section, and the circumference is signed with the specification. Concentric CNC lathe tool machining is good. I like the way it refracts the light. The milled slots are deburred and chamfered very well, no sharp edges, and it's very low profile. Just look how flat and low profile this is. Now bear in mind, this is an automatic. The Miyota Caliber 9075 has a rotor, and also it's a GMT complication movement. One would expect a bubble back case back in order to provide adequate clearance for the rotor, but this is a very flat case back. It's the kind of flat case back one would expect with a quartz powered or manual wind piece, but this is an automatic. The benefit of that is the piece is only 12.4mm thick. Bear in mind it has a 2mm thick double domed box top hat crystal. 12.4 for a GMT piece with a date complication is very impressive. Nice flat profile. The benefit of it being sterile in the centre is it feels very smooth and comfortable against the wrist when you're wearing it for long periods of time, such as 8 to 12 hours per day. And also the thickness is reduced to 12.4, but it is still 150 metres of hermetic seal. The finishing to the underside to the head of the piece is fantastic. No sharp edges to the undercuts to the flanks. The 4 tips of the lugs have nice large chamfers, so it doesn't have sharp corners to the 4 tips of the lugs. Quality of the finishing is exceptional. It's got concentric CNC lathe tool machining to the underside to the head of the piece. The female pivoted end links are a nice tight fit to the head of the piece. No play whatsoever. Good snug fit. Tolerances are good. So case back looks good, feels good. Finishing is exceptional. Engraving is good. It's high definition, but it doesn't feel sharp or rough against the wrist. So I'll give you a wrist shot and you can see how it fits on my 8-inch wrist. Now I haven't sized the bracelet, and as you can see, I'm pleased to report, actually what I'll do is I'll fully deploy it because then you'll be able to see what the maximum is if you have a larger wrist. So just bear with me. Now it's fully deployed. As you can see, this is the absolute maximum. So I haven't sized it. And as you can see, when it's on maximum extension, I can easily slide an index finger beneath the bracelet and clasp at all times. So the maximum wrist size this will support is up to an 8.5-inch wrist, with the micro adjustment clasp on its maximum extension. This will fit a minimum 6-inch wrist. There are enough removable links on the 6 o'clock and the 12 o'clock side to size it down to a minimum 6. It will fit from a 6 up to a maximum 8.5. As you can see, I have an 8-inch wrist. This will easily fit 8.5. So, half links either side are good. Perfection personified taper, 20mm down to 16, looks fantastic. Beautiful luster to the hardened 316L grade stainless steel bracelet. Female pivoted end links are the correct choice. They could have used male end links, but you can see the benefits. It pulls the end link in the oyster style bracelet snug to the wrist beneath the tips of the lugs. Nice large mirror polished bevels to the edge of the case, as you can see. So it does wear with good wrist presence. Now it's 38.5, but visually it does look and feel like a 39. And as you can see, although it does have a thick box top hat crystal, it is only 12.4. Anything below 13mm is the sweet spot to easily fit underneath a shirt cuff if you wear business shirts. The comfort level of this piece is fantastic. It is 10 out of 10. It feels weightless on wrist. The balance is correct. This is something that Traska do very well. The feel-good factor and the comfort level of their pieces. The head of the piece perfectly balances the bracelet and the micro-adjustment clasp. The proportions of the micro-adjustment clasp are also correct, as I've detailed. It's not too large or too bulky or too long. This is very similar in proportions to a Rolex Glide Lock clasp, and as you can see, the benefit is if you have a smaller wrist of 6 to 7 inches, it's going to curve around the wrist without any overhang. So at 38.5, this is clearly best suited to collectors with a 6 to 7 inch wrist. So you'll particularly enjoy the compact lug-to-lug measurement of 46. Strictly speaking, 48 is the perfect lug-to-lug. I often refer to it in my previous reviews as the sweet spot because 48mm lug-to-lug will perfectly fit all wrist sizes, regardless of whether you have a 6 to 7 inch wrist or a 7 to 8 inch wrist respectively. So at 46, it's 2mm below the perfect sweet spot of 48, but it does feel comfortable due to the female pivoted end links articulating very well. I think 6 to 7 inches is the perfect wrist size for this piece. It does still fit a 7 to 8 inch wrist, but you might feel that it doesn't have enough wrist presence for liking, but at 38.5 it does feel like a 39. Now I like the glossy black enamel dial, looks very aesthetically pleasing. Contrast of the stick indices and the baton handsets is very good, and also the contrasting GMT red hour hand is very good. Legibility of the date complication is good. Absolutely gorgeous piece. The inner rotating bezel looks very good, and I like the radial sunburst pattern or finishing to the bezel. It's just beautiful the way it catches the light. Box top hat crystal looks very good. Feel good factor of this piece is exceptional. It really does feel fantastic. Looks great from every angle. Comfort level is good because of the flat case back, and look how snug it is to the wrist. We don't have a large gap underneath the case back. The undercuts to the flanks sit very close to the wrist, and that's the benefit of not using a bubble back case back. The tips of the lugs have a nice minimal gap, so it really does curve around the wrist rather than sitting on top of the wrist like a slab of 316L grade stainless steel. Fantastic. It's the perfect daily wear piece with a GMT complication and a date complication. Now, the thing to note is it's also very light. It's only 140 grams. Now, you'll know from my previous reviews, anything below 150 grams is the sweet spot. At 140 grams, with all the links in the oyster style bracelet, this is a lightweight piece. It feels invisible on wrist. One of the most comfortable GMT pieces I have experienced, and I've reviewed over 400 watches on my channel. So let's do a Lume test and we'll see how the Lume performs when it's charged up to the absolute maximum. So as always, I'm going to use my 100 UV LED torch to charge it up to the absolute peak. Right, so that's now fully charged, and as you can see, it has not disappointed. This has actually exceeded my expectations because they've even fully lumed the inner rotating GMT bezel with BGW9 Superluminova. So the Arabic numerals and also the hour markers on the GMT bezel are fully lumed. In daylight conditions, there's a perfect colour tone match between the indices and the baton handset and also the triangle GMT hour hand. So the white tone in daylight perfectly matches on the dial and hands and also on the inner rotating bezel. In the dark, you can see the blue tone on the dial and the hands also perfectly matches. Now, it's difficult to apply 5 to 6 layers on the inner rotating bezel because it's not engraved and it doesn't allow for a lot of depth. But needless to say, you can still clearly read the BGW9 on the inner rotating bezel, the Arabic numerals and also the hour marks. But if you look at the colour tone match between the applied indices and the baton hands, it is perfect. The exciter is glowing very brightly, so this is clearly 5 to 6 layers of BGW9. Often mid-tier micro brands at this price point use the cost-cutting measure of only applying 3 to 4 layers, which cuts production costs and therefore increases profit margin per piece. But I'm pleased to see that Traska haven't made any cost-cutting measures whatsoever. This is clearly 5 to 6 layers on the applied indices and 5 to 6 layers on the baton handset. The exciter is continuing to glow brightly, so the performance is good. There is an area for refinement or improvement. They could engrave the inner rotating bezel deeper and therefore apply more layers of BGW9 to the Arabic numerals and the hour marks on the inner rotating bezel to give it better performance. But the performance on the dial and hands is 10 out of 10. They just need to improve the quality of the lume on the inner rotating bezel to match the performance of the exciter on the applied indices and the baton handset. But stellar performance on the dial and hands, just I would like to see more improvement on the inner rotating bezel. Right, so let's discuss the movement used, because it's one of my favourite aspects of the piece. So this uses the Miyota Calibre 9075 automatic, which has a GMT complication and also dates complication. It has 24 joules. It runs at 28,800 vibrations per hour and a frequency of 4 Hz. Has hand winding and hacking, which used for complications, and a quick set hour hand, which I've demonstrated, also advances the quick set date complication. 42-hour power reserve is perfectly acceptable. The stated accuracy of the Calibre 9075 is -10 to +20 seconds per day, so rather wide accuracy range. However, I'm pleased to report that Traska are doing a good job. They regulate their Calibre 9075s in 4 positions. This one is running consistently at +3 seconds per day, which is well within the stated accuracy of -10 to +20. So when it's fully wound to its maximum 42 hours, it's running consistently at +3 seconds. +3 is actually within chronometer grade accuracy of -4 to +6, so it's outstanding. So the Miyota 9075 is a reliable, well-proven workhorse GMT movement made in Japan. Build quality, quality control, materials and finishing are all outstanding. It's a premium 9000 series grade Miyota calibre, a level above the 8000 series. The benefits of the 9000 series, such as this 9075, is the rotor is quieter than the 8000 series Miyota movement. You'll all be familiar with Miyota movements such as the 8215, which has a noisy rotor. The 9000 series of Miyota calibres has a quieter rotor, so it's better quality, the refinement is there, the quality control, the build quality is higher level. 9075 is the correct choice. For example, Traska could have used the cost-cutting measure of using a less expensive calibre. They could have used the Seiko NH34A, for example, which is a GMT movement but less expensive. But they didn't. They used the more expensive option, which is the Miyota Calibre 9075, which is a premium grade movement. It's a level above the NH34A. Hand winding and hacking works well. Quick set complication for the hour hand works well, and also the manual winding feels very smooth. It feels smoother than a Sellita SW200-1, for example, and I really like it. The reliability is good, the accuracy is good, 42-hour power reserve, plus 3 seconds per day is outstanding accuracy for a GMT piece, which is automatic. So correct choice of movements. I think at this price point they've made the right choice. So lastly, I'll summarise the piece. What do I think of it overall? Well, when I'm considering reviewing a watch for my channel, the watch should meet 2 criteria. It should be both excellent quality and excellent value at the respective price point. So mid-tier price point piece, €689. Yes, this is unquestionably excellent quality, and yes, it is unquestionably excellent value at €689. The specification is absolutely loaded. We're looking at a piece which is entirely made from hardened 316L grade stainless steel with a hardness rating of 1200 HV. So bezel, head of the piece, bracelet and clasp are all hardened steel. One doesn't see that at €689 in the mid-tier. So that alone makes this excellent quality and excellent value. The AR coating works well, BGW9 works well, screw down crowns at 10 o'clock and 3 are sublime. Movement is premium grade, the Miyota 9075. It's a fantastic piece. The thing I like about it above all else is the micro adjustment clasp with the pelage finishing. Again, one doesn't see pelage finishing on a solid mill clasp at this price point. These kind of refinements, these enhancements are a credit to Traska and the quality control, build quality and tolerances of this micro adjustment clasp. This is €5,000 price point level finishing, build quality, quality control on a mid-tier piece at only €689. We're looking at correct decision after correct decision. Loaded specification, correct choice of movement, 9075. I like everything about this. This is the perfect daily wear piece with a GMT complication and a date complication. The only area they could refine upon it, the only negative, is the inner rotating bezel. I would like to see them engrave the Arabic numerals and the hour marks deeper and apply 5 to 6 layers to match the performance of the exciter of the applied indices and the baton hands, because the BGW9 on the hands and the dial is stellar performance, but it just needs improvement on the inner rotating bezel to match it. So they need to engrave it deeper and apply 5 to 6 layers on the inner rotating GMT bezel. That will make this piece Fantastic. So I'm going to declare it a champagne watch for lemonade money. I hope you've enjoyed my review of the Traska Ventura GMT Carbon Black. Please feel free to post your comments below the video. Thank you for watching.